the way of the line. I'm actually originally a chemical engineer. I built refineries and gas processing plants in different parts of the world. I just want to make one point. I don't know this audience, I don't know what you know, but I suspect you have probably by now got a lot of the facts about drilling. The country produces and consumes about 25 trillion cubic feet of natural gas a year. And what that boils down to is if natural gas costs $1, then that's $25 billion. Up till 5 years ago, it was thought that the price of natural gas would be $5, $6, $7, $8 a million BTUs. It's turned out to be 2.5. At the moment it's what, 2.25, 2.5. That's a saving of $4, $3, $4, $5 a million BTUs. That is $50 to $100 billion. Now, who gets this, who doesn't get it, I'm not interested in, for the point I want to make. The economy's been in recession, and coming out of recession, everyone who buys gas has not had to pay $5 or $6 a million BTUs. They've only had to pay 2 to 3. That's an enormous saving. People, just recently, someone I know had to stop deliveries because they couldn't afford gasoline. Some people are holding on because instead of paying, because they can pay their gasoline bill because they don't have to pay so much for the natural gas bill. So there is a national picture in this whole question of natural gas. It's a bounty. It's something we're lucky to have found, and if we husband it and use it properly, it'll be a boon for everyone and the economy for years to come. So there's a national picture. It isn't just down here at the local level. There's a national picture. Has anyone any question about that? No questions about the economy?
Yeah, what should I invest in coming out? If you knew you wouldn't be here, right?
No, I can't talk about the financial aspect. From an economic aspect, natural gas is part of the hydrogen economy, actually. People talk about the hydrogen economy, they talk about having hydrogen and oxygen and putting them together and making water, which is sustainable, and then that's good for the environment. Actually, methane is both carbon, which is like coal, and hydrogen, has a lot of hydrogen. And the hydrogen produces a lot of the heat, a lot of the energy in the methane. So you can argue with tongue-in-cheek that methane is in fact part of the hydrogen economy, as well as being a clean fuel that is easy to... The problem is, unlike coal, you can't leave it out in the rain. It's hard to store. And it's expensive to transport because you can't put it on a train or a truck. So it has a unique place in the economy, and we should argue that that's beneficial. Questions? Yes.
With the economy, with the drilling of the wells, there's argument that the cost of drilling the well is going to be more, and the consequences for the roads and everything will be more costly than the actual production of the gas. Is that?
Yes. Well, economies don't work in a neat step-by-step fashion. They're intensely complicated. And parts are being run well, parts are being run profitably, and other parts are being run not so well or unprofitably. And they exist side by side with each other, so that, in fact, at the moment, people who come in to drill in, let's say, Pennsylvania may well face the fact that because prices are so low, they're not making any money on the drilling, but because the lease requires them to drill, they have to drill. Now, that may seem, well, why do they do that? Because the lease says so. But you can be sure they're not going to do it for long. That is, at some point, they'll give in. Or the price will rise and the system will recover. For example, one of the reasons that the price of gas is so low is the success of drilling for shale oil up in the Bakken in the Midwest. You can make $100 a barrel from oil and make it $2.5 a million standard cubic feet from gas. Clearly, oil is more profitable. So what people are doing, what the drilling companies are doing is drilling for shale oil, not shale gas, shale oil in these regions, and in the process producing gas. Well, they're not really interested in the gas, they're interested in the oil. But they have to put the gas somewhere, they don't want to burn it. So they put it into the system and it depresses the price even more. So you have these counterintuitive things that go on. There's no simple way of analyzing the economy, except if you stand back, as I said originally, and say, on the whole, cheap natural gas has helped this economy over a very difficult period, 4-year period. If the price had been $3 or $4 higher, we may not be in this sort of fragile recovery we're in. By the way, gas drilling too is, if you've ever drilled an oil well, if an accident happens with oil, it really is a nuisance because everyone sees it. You don't like it yourself, it has to be cleaned up. With gas, the worst that happens is the gas is vented into the atmosphere if it's not flared. I've been involved in arguing that this practice of venting doesn't happen very often, and where it does happen, people try and minimize it. It's an argument that goes on within the argument about drilling for shale gas.
Sure.
Yes?
Can LNG be transported economically?
Well, LNG is liquefied natural gas, and that's taking methane and liquefying it, and that you can only do on a huge scale. That's what places like Qatar and Trinidad do. They have big trains which take methane, pure methane, and they refrigerate it, and they bring it to a big consuming center like Europe or the US, and they vaporize it again and send it through gas pipelines. If you mean LPG, you mean liquefied petroleum, then that's the propane and the butane that comes along with the gas, and that at the moment is very profitable because crude oil is profitable. Propane and butane can make the difference between a well being successful and not. So yes, you can. It's attractive feedstock for petrochemical plants, and some of the big petrochemical producers like Shell are talking of building ethylene plants, propylene plants here in the Northeast. They left this area with petrochemical plants 30 years ago. So they're coming back because of something like that.
Do you know, I've never heard this in particular, that product, talking about the transportation industry. Is it also possible for that product, the liquefied petroleum gas, to be used in the merchant fleet, the ships that transport around the world? Is that a potential avenue for usage, to increase the usage of this product?
I don't think it's used that way. Most ships have heavy fuel. I've never heard of LPG being used for that purpose. Yeah.
By increasing the distribution infrastructure, is there an opportunity to increase demand and thereby drive up?
Yes, well, if you're drilling, one of your immediate questions should be, if you think you have gas down there, is how are we going to get it out? Let me repeat something I tell my students. With coal, you know, the best fuel of oil, and I don't particularly like it. I grew up in a coal mining area. I know what coal is like, and I know what mining's like, but I don't like it. But one thing about coal is you can put it in a pile on the ground, it can be rained on, sat on, moved about, mixed with dirt, and you can throw it on the fire and it will burn. And you can put it on a lorry and take it anywhere. With gas, you can't quite do that. With oil, sorry, you can't quite do that. But you can clean it up and then use it. With gas, you need distribution. You have to have it. So once you get your well, you have to say, well, who's going to buy it? Now, clearly, ideally, you want more than one buyer, but maybe there's only the one. And it's going to cost you $1 million a mile, $2 million a mile to lay a decent-sized pipeline. So if the big pipeline's 20 miles away, that's 20 to 40 million bucks. Now, that sounds a lot in a way, but if there are a lot of you who have gas, that can be paid off with transportation, with a fee quite quickly, you know, in a matter of a few years. So it's not an insurmountable problem. As long as you're not the only one who wants to go 20 miles, then it is. Make sense? So that's why places like Texas, it's so easy to drill, because the place has pipelines all over. They've been doing drilling for 150 years. So they have a pipeline system, small pipes, medium-sized pipes, big pipes, all over the place. It's not, you don't have to go very far to be able to sell it. And ideally, you have a lot of buyers who are in that market who are willing to compete for your gas. Problem is, if you've just got one off-taker, he sets the price.
Take one more question.
Yes.
When do you see gas prices going back to $5 or $6?
If I knew that, I wouldn't be. It's a fair question. If the recession falters, then and the economy is like this. The recession falters. Say Europe heads into a worse recession, and we can't help it. We go in, we're tied to them in many ways. Then later rather than sooner. If the recovery is fundamentally strong at the moment, we just don't see that. Then maybe in 2 or 3 years, if the yes, that's the best I can do.
I just have a quick question. For local businesses, do you have any statistics or any information that might be, like if a hospital changes over, what that savings or what type of savings they're looking at for a business or for an institution?
Yeah, well, I looked at whether it's feasible to convert, as an example of this, it shows converting school buses to natural gas. And the answer, it costs about $20,000 to $40,000 to refit a bus. If you buy a new bus for gas, it's $350,000. But if you refit your fleet with a new engine, then it pays off in, at the moment, 6 to 10 years. If gas prices go, if they were for some reason to peak, you pay it off very quickly. But at the moment, it's borderline. You have to pay off that investment. You have to, if they run on diesel, you've got to pay off changing the engine.
I got a question. Right now, the gas is selling at about $2.25 BTU, million BTU. Which, how about coal? What is that selling? A million BTUs.
You know, I haven't looked at that
Where will we find
recently. Generally speaking, the coal companies compete by promising by undercutting gas and then promising long contracts. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to your question.
Where would you find it? I saw it one time in the Wall Street Journal, it was $1.94, it was about a year ago. We've been slowly getting to that point.
The answer to your question may be whatever the price of gas is, the coal guys are beaten. That's the way they have to work. You sink a mine, you get them. I'm really talking about. Let's pretend you found a new area on the Powder River. Then you go out for power purchase agreements, and if you want to build that and pay it off and get the money from financial support from banks or funds,
You have to have the contract.
you have the contract, and so you'll do within the limits of making a return, and you've got a lot of leeway on that. You'll undercut, yes.
Thank you.
In its simplest form right now, it's basically an oversupply and a lack of demand that's driving the price to where it is. What would be the simplest or the best or the most effective way to increase demand? Would it be power plants generating electricity? Would it be fleet vehicles and tractor trailers and personal cars? What would be a great way to start driving demand?
I think the way it will be driven by utilities. Utilities pay the least. There's residential, commercial, industrial, and utilities are at the bottom. They pay that average, that 225, whatever, is an average of all these things, and always at the bottom are the utilities. And the other ones, because they're competing with the coal, so that's where the coal is, almost all the coal is used in utilities. So, it's actually being mandated at the moment. At the weekend, wasn't it announced that the £1,000 per megawatt for CO2, the EPA is saying you can't build a power plant if you emit more than £1,000 per megawatt. Now that almost in almost every design of a coal plant, coal utility, that will the coal will be infeasible. So actually, you should hope that the EPA helps you.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, I have one back here.
Got it. One last one, because then I've got somebody's got to run out.
You don't have to bring that back, I can stand it up. I read in the New York Times, a newspaper that we don't all trust, but I read in the New York Times that in 2013, there's 32 nuclear power plants that are going to be aged out of business, and that the plan is to convert them to natural gas. So that should help the demand because they all provide a lot of mega power to the cities that they're in. And the other thing that I've been following is that the Northeast has just had the warmest winter since 1950.
Correct.
And that's why there's so much, that has driven the price. of
I meant to mention that earlier and I forgot. You're correct.
That drove the price of natural gas way down.
Yes.
Personally, I went from burning six tons of pellets, I only burned 3 this year, that's how nice the winter was. And that's why I could afford to drive up there today. But there's a lot of things in place in Pennsylvania right now where they're calling for natural gas stations throughout the whole state. They're changing all their trucks over to natural gas, interstate trucks, their fleets, and their vehicles are all being changed over. And that's what we need to work on here in New York. Now that I pretty much think that we're on the winning side of this natural gas issue, and I think now we have to take another step farther and start contacting our congressmen and senators and legislators, saying, hey, let's follow suit with PA and make the demand for the natural gas because it's cheaper, it does help everybody. It's cleaner than coal, and we all know that, so I'm preaching to the choir here. But that's what we have to work on. We have to focus on getting it, and I think we are winning that battle now. And now we have to focus on putting it to use. And I think that's where our next step should be as landowners, is to put pressure on Albany to build these gas stations and things like that in New York State and convert power plants. Coal is a sore subject to me. I've been fighting coal for a little over 9 years. But from what I understand, Pennsylvania just opened up a new coal plant, or coal mine, and most of it's for Japan because of the tsunami knocking out. That they're actually taking 30% more coal in their country than they were before the tsunami. So from what I understand, coal is going to be targeting European countries and the Orient and things like that don't have the shale gas that we have. So overall, I think the economics, and I'm no economic advisor or anything, but from what I watch, I think the gas prices myself are going to start going up this year. I really do.
Yeah, so these nuclear plants often are 1,000 megawatts, so if you shut one of them down, that means a lot of gas.
Is there any chance the Pickens plan is going to get through?
You mean powering cars with natural gas?
Interstate trucks, I think it was. You're going to put up gas stations for natural gas stations.
Yeah, but you compete, the trouble is you're competing against a system that's in place, paid for, called gasoline. It really is. You just go out and spend new money, and it's quite hard to pay that off. That's the problem.
Thank you so much.